Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new chapter of our Oxford Handbook of Open Innovation Conversations. This is a new edition of the Open Innovation Thursdays. Every week, we spend 15 minutes talking about one of the chapters of the Oxford Handbook of Open Innovation. My name is Marisol Menendez. I'm an open innovation enthusiast and fangirl. And it's a luck. I'm very lucky because I have the possibility to do this, and I've been learning so much. And we are almost getting to the end, but we will talk about that. Today we have one of our guest of honor, editor of the book, father of open innovation, our dear Henry Chesbrough. Hi, Henry. How are you today?
Hello, Marisol. I am also an open innovation enthusiast. So it's good to have the chance to talk with you.
Yeah, it's always a joy to be able to spend some time talking about the things that one loves, no? I think this is a fortunate event. Henry, you are not new to our podcast. You spoke with us several times, many times as a guest, one time as an interviewer as well. And we are more than 1 year after we kicked off this series of interviews. We are today talking about chapter 55. I always like to begin asking people to introduce yourselves, but you already introduced yourself quite some times. I don't know if you have anything to add, like, for example, how are you today? Where are you connecting from? What have you been doing recently?
Yeah, so maybe I'll say a couple of quick things. Yes, I'm Henry Chesbrough, and I have done a lot of my work at UC Berkeley. I do have a part-time appointment at Lewis University in Rome, and I often describe my work as why bad things can happen to good technology, so that people think that it doesn't always work. And indeed, we can often learn more from the failures than from the successes, which is a point we're going to talk about in some depth on this chapter, which is all about failures in open innovation.
That's it. We like talking about failures. In fact, by the way, you inspired this thing you see in my background is an event we do here in Bilbao called the Failure Festival, where we invite people to talk about failure. So today it's also a joyful day for me because we are talking about chapter 55 of the book, Failure Cases in Open Innovation. You are the sole author, Henry Chesbrough. This is part of the last section of the book. We are almost there because there are 57 chapters. This section is called Challenges, Critiques, and Suggestions of Open Innovation. So I always like to begin the conversation with this question. Why is this chapter in the book? What's the story of it being here?
Scholars who study innovation and open innovation are a pretty optimistic bunch. And we generally love telling the stories when cool things are happening on something that's new and exciting. And I'm like that too. I get carried away and excited by new and exciting things. But this chapter is in the Open Innovation Handbook, which is itself filled with lots of great stories of innovation in many different industries. This chapter talks about failures and failures in open innovation itself. So the chapter's included so that scholars working in open innovation are reminded that it doesn't always work. And once we think about those cases where it has not worked, maybe we go back to some of our theories and we reconsider how much or to what extent open innovation can work. And maybe there are sometimes boundary conditions that need to be satisfied in order for open innovation to work. So we're still learning about open innovation, but now we're learning from the failures as well as the successes.
Yeah, I can see in practice, for example, when we were putting together that conference, or when you need to prepare your indicators to report to the management about the innovation activity, talking about failure is difficult, kind of taboo, no, at some point. So it's very interesting to have this chapter included, as we say in Spanish, to open the melon on this topic, no? So what is the chapter about? What are you talking about? What can we learn from it?
Yeah, I'm going to use three examples to illustrate that open innovation doesn't always work, and that maybe there's some things we can learn from the failures that might update our theories about open innovation. And we can take them in any order you want, but the three examples I wanted to talk about were quirky, innocentive, and Procter and Gamble. So two of
Promising,
them are
promising.
startups. One of them is one of the biggest and oldest consumer goods companies anywhere. They've all had real deep experience with open innovation, and they've also all experienced significant failures in open innovation.
Go
So
ahead.
where would you like to start?
Well, I'm fan of quirky and the case, so let's begin there.
Yeah. So sometimes innovation managers complain that they don't get good support from top management. Either top management doesn't understand open innovation, or they give lip service, but they don't really believe in it, and they don't commit resources to support it. Quirky is an example of a startup built around open innovation, where the CEO, a guy named Ben Kaufman, was a deep believer in open innovation, and he raised over $170 million to develop the company known as Quirky. Should I tell you a little bit about the model?
Yes, please.
So Quirky was a model that was based on crowdsourcing ideas for new products for consumer goods.
Mhm.
And we individuals could go onto the Quirky website and propose an idea for a new product. And Quirky had a review process that would sift through the suggestions. And when they found one that they thought had real promise, they would put it through an internal development process and actually manufacture and sell that product and give you, the person that proposed it, a royalty for your ideas. So you could think of Quirky from the inventor standpoint. They were kind of your product development shop. If they took your idea, and other than contributing the idea, you didn't have to commit any other money. They would do the rest of the development on their own funding, and then they would market and sell it to consumers under the Quirky name.
And they even were searching for teams, no? Like you can be a designer, an engineer, and participate in the rest of the process. No?
So you're correct that at the next level, once they've developed they've selected the ideas they're going to work on, they would come back to the community and say, here's what we're working on. Do any of you have any relevant skills and talent to help us? And they would set aside a smaller pool of royalties to share among the people that joined to contribute on the development of the idea. So the big royalty went to the person who originated it, but there was a second pool of money for other people who helped to develop it as well. So off they go. They raise a lot of money, this $170 million. Some of the money they raised from General Electric, who not only invested in the company, they also signed an agreement to manufacture some of the products that go through this process. So that's a second sort of validation for what they were doing, that a big, well-funded company like GE thought it was a good idea to invest in them and then work with them on the manufacturing. So, what went wrong and what can we learn? Well, the company was founded in 2009 and unfortunately declared bankruptcy in 2015. So, about 6 years later. So, they had a good run as a startup. They went up, but then they went down again. And I would say there are at least two lessons from this for open innovation. The first was Quirky needed a steady stream of consumer products to keep coming through its process and its pipeline so that it could continue to earn the revenues and then pay the royalties to its contributors. And it turned out that there were a few very successful product ideas, but there was a long tail of other stuff that really didn't make any money and in fact cost the company a lot of money. And so the lesson to me for scholars in open innovation is, crowdsourcing has a lot of merit, but there are a lot of costs, and we don't always talk about those costs. And in this case, they sunk the company. So that's a little bit about Quirky.
And you need to have the patience to bear that cost, no? Or not?
Well, if you have a steady stream of products, you can. But if you only have an occasional hit, and then it could be many months before another hit comes along, it's hard to be patient.
Yeah.
And so that's how they ran out of money. They didn't get enough hits quickly enough. So with $170 million, they didn't spend that all at once. They were able to be fairly patient. But crowdsourcing, this is one of the attributes of crowdsourcing. It's not a dependable, reliable source. You can't schedule the next great idea and when it's going to come. You don't know when it's going to come. And there also is going to be that long tail that's very costly that you can count on. That will be there. So if you don't have enough revenue to offset that, it can kill your company. So that's something we don't write about in crowdsourcing very much. And I think it's an important lesson from Quirky. Should we talk now about Innocentive?
Yes, please.
So Innocentive was a spin-out of Eli Lilly way back in the late 90s during the dot-com period. And it was based on the idea that there are a lot of smart people who don't work for you. And the internal program was called Bounty Chem. The idea that you pay a bounty for chemistry ideas from outside. And as they started to think about this, they had these problems that they weren't able to solve to their satisfaction internally. Maybe we should be asking external people. So it's another kind of crowdsourcing, you might say. And so they then had another insight that I think was very smart, which is if we want to get good solutions to these difficult problems we can't solve, you want a big crowd. And so that's going to be better. You're going to get a bigger crowd if you have not only Eli Lilly's challenges, but challenges from many other companies too. That will attract a much bigger group of people to solve your problems. That insight led to the spin-out of what then became Innocentive, a private company. It raised about $17 million in venture capital. And they were, I would say, one of the early examples of open innovation because they had a crowd of what they called seekers, typically larger companies looking for solutions to difficult, usually technical problems. And they had an even bigger community of what they called solvers, people who would contribute solutions to these problems. So seekers and solvers, two-sided market, crowdsourcing to connect them. And Innocentive is still in operation today, but the company sold its assets to a company called Wazuko in the UK a few years ago, and they sold it for about 1.5 billion pounds. So if you start with $17 million and then 20 some years later, you sell it for 1.5 million pounds, it's not a success.
Okay.
So, again, what can we learn from this? I think there are a couple of lessons from InnoCenter that kind of build on the crowdsourcing issues we saw before with Quirky. One is that uh, taking the seeker's problems and then translating it into language that allows you to send it out to a public audience without revealing sensitive technical internal information. That was an important step in their model, and it slowed them down in its ability to scale and to do it. So each of these challenges took time to create. And then when you got solutions back, they all had to be reviewed. Remember that long tail I was talking about? And again, it was pretty costly to do that. So that was again a repeat of the earlier problem. A second problem was how do you keep the solvers engaged? I did some back of the envelope math in this chapter, and I think it was over the 20-year period of their operation, they had paid out more than 400 awards to their solver community. And the average award was, I don't remember the exact number, but let's say it was $15,000 or $20,000. So, the payout in total is, millions and millions of dollars. But the crowd that they attracted, it varied over time, but they had somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million solvers in their community. And over 20 years, they made 400 payouts. So your odds on any given year of winning a challenge were infinitesimal.
Yeah.
So for most solvers, they didn't engage on most of the challenges because the odds were so much against them that why even bother? So InnoCenter promoted its big solver community, but in truth, most of those solvers were disengaged, and there wasn't enough activity to keep them coming back and engaging and working. And after you try for one contest and you lose, and maybe you try a second, maybe you try a third, pretty soon you're going to stop trying.
Of course.
So I think this is a second issue. And there's even a term for this that I kind of like that you don't really hear about when people talk about crowdsourcing. And it's the term social waste, where you're taking all these people's time to submit all these possible answers, and almost all of them are not going to win, and they get nothing for spending all that time. So that's the social waste. So early crowdsourcing researchers were looking at the one winning idea and saying, isn't that great? Isn't that cool? And they were right. It was great. It was cool. But they weren't really noticing what happened to everybody else. And so I think that's a second insight from the
Very, very
innocent example.
interesting. Very interesting. And what's the third one? What happened with Procter and Gamble?
The third one is one that I'm sure you looked at when you were at BBVA, and that is Procter and Gamble. So Procter and Gamble, go ahead. Procter and Gamble is a tale in two parts. The first part of the story starts from 2002 through 2008. And during this period, Procter and Gamble becomes one of the first adopters of open innovation at scale. They called it Connect and Develop instead of Research and Develop. And they got a lot of real business benefits out of this Connect and Develop program. And I mean billions of dollars of new revenue that they would not have received if they hadn't done the program. So it really paid off for them in a big way. And you don't have to take my word for it. The CEO of the company, a guy named A.G. Lafley, wrote a book in 2008 called Game Changer, which was all about this new approach to innovation and how it was a game changer for P&G. It really paid off for them. And people like me, people like you, we would study P&G and think, what are they doing and what can we learn from it, etc. So that was P&G through 2008. In 2009, Lafley retires. We have the Great Recession hit, and that hit consumer products businesses hard. We have a new CEO at Procter & Gamble. And like CEOs everywhere, they have their own priorities they want to emphasize. The new CEO didn't want to simply continue what Lafley was doing. He wanted to make his own mark on the company. So the priorities start to shift. And so in the second half of the story, and I show the financial data in the chapter, from 2002 to 2008, revenues grew and grew and grew. And from 2009 through 2016, the revenues dropped. So even though P&G knew open innovation, knew how to practice it, had real business results from doing it, they sort of lost the formula. The things that were bringing them good business results stopped bringing them good business results. So for those of us who think about open innovation, this should be troubling because we think in business schools, if we can teach our students examples of companies doing it well, our assumption is those capabilities will keep paying off into the future. Here's an example where it didn't. So, wow, what do we learn from that? And I think there's a couple of lessons here too. One was, the CEO role. When Lafley was in charge, he was driving it. He aligned the incentives across the different parts of the organization, all the way up to his direct reports, and made part of their bonus contingent on achieving these open innovation goals. And so the organization really responded. When the new CEO came in, new priorities came. I don't know, but I'm guessing the comp plan for the topmost executives changed and open innovation was no longer part of the bonus plan. I think the organization kind of fell back into more siloed behavior where they didn't connect and collaborate as much as they used to. That's the first thing. The second thing I think happened is competition. P&G was really at the forefront of consumer goods in 2002 when they brought this model up at scale. Well, since that time, Lafley wrote his book in 2008. I gave lots of talks to lots of consumer packaged goods companies during this period of time, and Procter & Gamble was almost always one of my examples. And I talked to Kimberly-Clark. I talked to Kellogg's. I talked to Mars Foods. I talked to Kraft. I talked to company after company that was a competitor of P&G in at least some of its businesses. So I think over the period starting in 2009, the rest of the industry admired what P&G had done, studied it, and then copied it. And so things that were differentiating a few years earlier, now everybody in the consumer packaged goods business was doing it. And P&G in the meantime, because of, again, the new CEO, new organization, new leadership, they weren't innovating and further advancing open innovation. They were off doing other things while their competitors caught up. So I think that's the second thing that happened. So it reminds us that any innovation matters. It matters not only what you're doing, but what you're doing relative to your competitors. And if you're well ahead of your competitors, as P&G was in the first period, that can deliver really good business results. But if your competitors catch up and you haven't kept innovating, which I think is the story in the second half, your business results can turn the other way.
Wow. This is so interesting because it opens up part of the basic elements of open innovation. At first, that deliberation that comes in the very basic definition of open innovation. It's defined, and you can see it in practice, in the bonuses, processes, organization, appointments, CEO decisions that you have around open innovation, and it has its effects, as you shown. But also these decisions are not frozen. You need to keep updating them according how organizations grow. And I think that's where the challenge relies. And the other thing you made, well, sorry, were you gonna say something?
Well, just as I present these ideas to people in industry, one of the conclusions that I draw for them is where you were going, that it isn't a set of practices by itself. It's a mindset. And if you can build the mindset and the culture and remain curious, keep experimenting, keep collaborating, reflect on your experiences and improve as you go, then you can, I think, sustain an advantage with open innovation. But if it's just a list of practices, other companies can and will copy them. And pretty soon everybody is doing crowdsourcing or university collaborations and so on. So you're not really differentiating yourself anymore. So the mindset matters much more than the individual practices.
Totally agree. And this allows room for learning and applying and adapting to each company and each culture. Even as we've seen it in real life, two banks can do different things and be successful in their own strategy. So it's not even a matter of the sector or the business, but also about culture, no? And the other,
Well, you know a lot about the banking sector, so I agree with you.
yeah, the other thing you made me think about is where you began was talking about considering the failures. And if we think about the innovation funnel, there's this difference between the entrance and the output. Everything that is not in the output might be considered a failure, no? And depending on how deep is your funnel and know how but we will always have failure there. And if we don't dedicate time to analyze and to learn and capture value from the scraps, we are losing a lot of value there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities from actively taking time to capture also value from there, no?
Well, and I gave three examples in the chapter and in our interview. Most of my academic colleagues have not taken much notice of this. I read very, very little that cites these failures. And either my analysis of them, or maybe they have their own analysis of what explains the failure, which is also valuable. I'm not seeing it. I think a lot of my colleagues are kind of ignoring it. And that's why it's in the handbook, because I don't think we should ignore it. And for managers, when I tell them about the failures, they get very interested. They're like, yeah, that could happen here too. And they would like to make new mistakes rather than repeating mistakes other organizations have already made. So both from a theoretical standpoint and from an industry practice standpoint, we can learn a lot from failures, but we have to start by acknowledging them, describing them, analyzing and interpreting them so that we can do that.
And sharing them. We will keep working and enticing people to share failures because this is how we learn as society. Henry, thank you very much for dedicating this time to talk about it's two chapters before last of this amazing handbook, a huge adventure we didn't think would end soon, but here we are. And this is an amazing topic. And I think that in the continuation of the podcast, we should bring also failure cases because this is how we learn, as we discussed today. Thank you very much for your time today.
Marisol, it's a pleasure. And I never told you that I'm participating from Istanbul, Turkey right now. So it's a pleasure to be with you. And I like your idea of even after we get through all the chapters, we can keep going. And one of the ways we can keep going is to look for these possible failures. Could be a good application of crowdsourcing.
Oh, That's perfect. And
A
even
call for failures.
call for failures. We are opening also the call for speakers for the future chapters. So let's emphasize in call for failures, people. And let's keep learning. Henry, once again, thank you very much. We appreciate a lot, not only your time for the chapter, but also all of these that we've been talking for years now. That is also part of our lives and professions and passions. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, Marisol.
And see you guys. We are keeping with our chapters and we will continue talking about open innovation. See you.
Okay.